Ever get frustrated with like traditional finance,
Right.
Hidden fees and the power that banks and governments have, it's such a hassle.
Yeah.
Well, back in 2008, someone was like, enough.
Mm.
This person, they went by the name Satoshi Nakamoto.
Oh, yeah.
And their solution, Bitcoin. So today we're diving deep into their white paper, Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system,
Wow.
to uncover how it all began. What do you think?
It is, it really is fascinating to see how this, document just released online quietly sparked a revolution. And we're not just talking about like tech here, but a whole new way of thinking about money and trust.
Right. And I gotta admit, some parts of it, they still kind of make my head spin a little bit. Like, how do you even create digital cash that is secure without someone in charge?
Mm-hmm.
How do you stop people from spending the same Bitcoin like twice? That's where you come in to help us unpack all of this.
Well, the white paper starts by laying out the problem. Traditional systems, right? They require you to trust third parties.
Like banks.
Yeah, like banks.
Mm.
But that trust, it comes with a cost, right?
Mm.
There are transaction fees, there's the potential for fraud, and the fact that payments can be reversed.
Which, I mean, I guess that protects us in some cases, but it makes things so clunky.
Yeah.
Like, can you imagine paying for your coffee with a credit card?
Oh,
With fees would be ridiculous.
astronomical.
So how does Bitcoin address this?
By getting rid of the middleman entirely.
Oh, yeah.
It proposes this network, a decentralized peer-to-peer network. Imagine like a digital ledger that everyone can see and agree on,
Okay.
but it's not controlled by any single entity.
That's starting to make sense. But if everyone can see this ledger, how do we prove who owns what?
Right.
I mean, isn't that a security risk?
That's where these digital signatures come in. Think of it like a, cryptographic lock and key kind of system.
Oh, okay.
So you use your unique private key to sign transactions. This proves that you're the rightful owner of the Bitcoin you're sending, and no one can forge that signature.
So it's like a super secure digital fingerprint.
Exactly.
Okay. But I'm still stuck on this whole double spending problem. If it's just digital information, couldn't someone just copy it and spend the same Bitcoin like over and over?
Yeah, that's the big challenge.
Yeah.
And the white paper gets really ingenious here. It introduces something called proof of work. Now, imagine a puzzle that's like computationally expensive.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Miners have to solve this puzzle to verify transactions.
Oh, wow.
Whoever solves it first gets to add a new block to the chain. And they get rewarded with, you guessed it, Bitcoin.
So it's like a race where the winner gets a prize and the prize is brand new Bitcoin.
It is.
But how does that stop someone from, double spending? It just sounds like a fun little competition.
It's the cost of the race that matters. Since these puzzles require so much computing power, it becomes pretty much impractical for any one miner, even a dishonest one, to control the majority of the network.
So to double spend, they'd have to outcompute everyone else, which would be super expensive and basically impossible. Clever. So they built in like an economic disincentive to cheat the system.
Exactly.
Wow.
And this ties into another key idea, the longest chain. So the chain with the most accumulated proof of work, you could say the most effort put in, that's considered the authoritative version of the transaction history. As long as most miners are honest, the longest chain will always be the truthful one.
So strength in numbers, basically.
Yeah.
Makes sense. But if mining is this intense computational race, that must use a ton of energy. There's got to be a downside somewhere, right?
That's a valid concern, and definitely a point of debate in the crypto world. The white paper itself doesn't really get too much into energy consumption, but it does lay out the framework for how mining works and the incentive structure that drives it.
Right. We're just looking at the foundation here. So we've got this system that's decentralized and it's secured by all this clever math and economic incentives.
Right.
But what about privacy? Is everything just out in the open on this big public ledger?
That's where things get a little nuanced.
Yeah.
Well, every transaction is visible.
Mm-hmm.
Your public keys, those cryptographic addresses, they stay anonymous. It's kind of like seeing money change hands, but not knowing whose hands they are.
Okay, so there's a degree of anonymity, but not like complete invisibility.
Right.
Makes sense. But I mean, couldn't someone track those public keys and eventually figure out who's behind them?
The white paper acknowledges that, especially with transactions that are more complex. It recommends that you use new key pairs for each transaction to increase privacy. But some linking might still be possible.
Got it. So it's like an evolving challenge. Even back then, they knew that.
Yeah.
This is a lot to take in. It feels like we've only just started to understand how Bitcoin works.
There's so much more to explore.
Mm.
Remember, we're still just laying the groundwork here.
Okay.
Next, we'll dive into even more technical stuff like Merkle trees and something called simplified payment verification.
Whoa, Merkle trees. Sounds like we're heading into the forest of cryptography.
We are.
I'm ready if you are. Let's do it. The really fascinating thing is how these technical details connect back to real-world uses and the potential that Bitcoin has to really impact the future of finance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've established like the basics, right?
Yeah.
Like Bitcoin's trying to replace trust in institutions with, some clever cryptography in this decentralized network.
Right.
But let's be real, this white paper can get really dense.
It can.
You mentioned Merkle trees earlier, and honestly, that sounds more like something out of a fantasy novel than a financial system.
I can see that. But don't worry,
Go on.
it's not as complicated as the name might make it seem.
Okay.
Remember how we were talking about the blockchain being this like ever-growing ledger of transactions?
Yeah.
Well, as you can imagine, that ledger gets huge EE over time,
Yeah.
storing that whole thing on every single computer in the network.
Oh my God.
It would just become a massive problem.
Yeah, my phone's already complaining about storage space, and that's just from, cat videos.
Right.
How does Bitcoin deal with that? So that's where Merkle trees come in.
Okay.
Like a super efficient way of organizing the blockchain,
Okay.
like a filing system.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine like each transaction is a single piece of paper.
Okay.
Now, a Merkle tree organizes those papers into bundles and then bundles of bundles,
Oh, wow.
creating this hierarchy all the way up to a single root
Okay.
that represents the whole block of transactions.
So it's like creating a summary of a giant book.
Yeah.
You can check if a specific sentence is in there by looking at the index and following the trail without reading the entire thing.
Exactly. That's a great analogy.
Oh, cool.
So the Merkle tree, it lets you verify if a specific transaction is included in a block without needing to download all of the data for the entire block.
That's practical, especially for those of us who aren't running, industrial grade servers to manage our Bitcoin.
Right.
So how does this play out in real world use?
So this is where simplified payment verification comes in.
Okay.
Instead of you running a full node, which stores the whole blockchain,
Right.
you can just use a lightweight wallet
Like on my phone.
exactly on your phone. And that only needs to download the block headers.
Those summaries we talked about?
Exactly. The summaries,
Oh.
which are much smaller.
So my phone can verify transactions without, turning into a brick from data overload.
Exactly.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it is.
But doesn't that mean relying on other nodes to be honest about the headers?
It does.
Okay.
And the white paper does acknowledge this kind of trade-off,
Uh-huh.
simplified payment verification.
Yeah.
Super convenient.
Yeah.
But it assumes that the network as a whole is mostly made up of honest nodes.
Right. That whole strength in numbers idea we talked about earlier.
Exactly. As long as most miners are playing by the rules,
Yeah.
the system should stay secure.
Okay, cool.
What's really brilliant about the white paper is that it addresses both the theoretical and the practical sides of things.
Yeah.
So it explains how this system works, but it also considers how to make it usable for, everyday people.
Okay, so Merkle trees are like a space-saving hack.
You got it.
And simplified payment verification lets us participate without needing a supercomputer.
Right.
But I still have some questions.
Of course.
Like, what about those transaction fees we discussed?
Yeah.
How do those work in a system where there's no, central bank to collect them?
That's a great question. And honestly, that wasn't really fully explained in the white paper.
Okay.
You got to remember, this was just a starting point,
Right.
a framework.
A rough framework.
The specifics about how transaction fees work, they kind of evolved over time.
So Satoshi laid the groundwork, but the finer details got filled in as Bitcoin, grew and adapted.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, who could have predicted everything back in 2008?
Right.
That's a long time ago,
It is.
especially in the tech world.
It is. It is. And it really speaks to the open source nature of
Yeah.
Bitcoin. Developers all over the world have contributed to how it's evolved,
Yeah.
constantly refining the system. But those core principles outlined in the white paper, they're still so crucial.
Speaking of core principles, one thing that really struck me was how the white paper handled this idea of, flexibility in transactions. Like, what
Yeah.
if I only want to send a fraction of a Bitcoin? It's
Yeah.
not like breaking off a piece of gold.
Right. That's a really important point.
Yeah.
And that's where the white paper introduces the concept of transactions that have multiple inputs and outputs.
Right.
This allows you to combine or split Bitcoin values however you need to.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But how does that work in practice? It sounds a bit complex.
Let's say you've received Bitcoin in several different transactions,
Okay.
maybe from different people or for different services, right?
Mm-hmm.
Each of those transactions, they become an input.
Okay.
It's like a record of where you got those specific amounts of Bitcoin.
So like little digital receipts showing where my Bitcoin came from.
Exactly like digital receipts.
Okay, cool.
Now, let's say you want to make a purchase that costs, let's just say 0.25 Bitcoin.
Okay.
You might not have a single input for exactly that amount.
Right.
Instead, you can combine multiple inputs,
Okay.
like pulling together different bills and coins from your
Right.
wallet
Yeah.
to reach that 0.25 Bitcoin.
Okay, so I gather the right receipts, combine them to cover the cost, and send them off to the seller.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Cool.
And that's where the outputs come in.
Okay.
So one output's going to be directed to the seller's address,
Right.
transferring that 0.25 Bitcoin.
Got it.
But what if the combined value of your inputs is actually more like 0.5 Bitcoin?
Well, I wouldn't want to overpay. There must be a way to get the extra back, right?
That's exactly what that second output is for.
Okay.
The remaining 0.25 Bitcoin gets sent back to you as change.
Like getting change back from the store.
Exactly like getting change back.
Okay, cool.
And it's sent to a new address that you control.
So it keeps everything balanced.
Yeah, keep it all nice and tidy.
I'm starting to appreciate just how elegant this whole system is.
Yeah.
But honestly, it also sounds kind of complicated for like everyday use.
Yeah.
Is this something that the average person needs to worry about? Or does it all just happen behind the scenes?
That's the great thing about it. The complexity is handled by the software.
Oh, okay.
Your wallet takes care of combining the right inputs and creating those outputs.
Wow.
All you need to do is specify the amount you want to send
Uh-huh.
and the recipient's address.
So while the mechanics are, intricate,
Yeah.
the user experience is pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it is.
That's reassuring.
Yeah,
It reminds me of how we talked about, Merkle trees and simplified payment verification.
right.
This white paper seems to balance robust technology and accessibility for everyday users.
Exactly. Precisely.
Good.
And that really is a testament to Satoshi's vision. The white paper, it's not just a theoretical framework.
Mm-hmm.
It anticipates the practicalities of how people would use it.
It's incredible to think that all of this, this whole decentralized network, the proof of work system, these transaction mechanisms,
Right.
it was all laid out in this one document like over 15 years ago.
It's really groundbreaking.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
And remember, it's not like a static document either.
Right.
The system keeps evolving.
Yeah.
Developers are always building on and refining these core ideas.
Why it's like a living system,
It is, yeah.
constantly adapting.
Constantly adapting.
And that's one of the things that I think is so exciting about it. We've
Yeah.
covered a lot of ground today.
You have.
From like the philosophical ideas to the, technical nuts and bolts.
That's a lot.
Yeah, but I think the biggest takeaway for me is, the sheer ingenuity and foresight of Satoshi's vision.
I completely agree. The white paper, it's not just a blueprint for this new technology.
Mm.
It challenges how we think about money, about trust, and the power of these decentralized systems.
And it's a challenge that people are still talking about today.
They are.
As we're wrapping up this deep dive,
Yeah,
I encourage everyone listening to, check out the white paper for themselves.
definitely.
It's a fascinating read, even if you don't, get every little technical detail.
Right?
What matters is understanding those fundamental ideas and, what they could mean.
Yeah, the potential,
Mm.
it's an invitation to think differently about things.
Yeah.
To question, like, your assumptions,
Uh-huh.
and to imagine a future where these financial systems are more transparent,
Yeah.
more secure, more accessible
Yeah.
for everyone.
And that's the power of a truly great idea, right?
It is.
It sparks curiosity, it ignites debate, it inspires us to see new possibilities.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about these Merkle trees and simplified payment verification and how Bitcoin security is, always evolving. But before we wrap up our deep dive into the white paper,
Yeah.
I want to touch on one more kind of fascinating thing.
Okay.
How Bitcoin handles like combining and splitting value. It's not like you can break off a piece of a Bitcoin
Right.
like it's a gold bar.
Exactly.
Right.
It's digital.
Yeah,
Now, how does that work?
that's a great point. And it highlights one of the key innovations that the white paper outlines: transactions with multiple inputs and outputs. And this is what lets you send like precise amounts of Bitcoin, even fractions of a whole coin.
Okay, I'm intrigued, but I'm also a little lost.
Sure.
Can you break that down a bit more? What are these inputs and outputs, and like how do they work together?
Okay, so imagine you've received Bitcoin in like several separate transactions, right?
Yeah.
Maybe from different people for different things. Over time,
Hmm.
each of those transactions becomes an input.
Okay.
It's a record of where you received those specific amounts of Bitcoin.
So like little digital receipts showing where my Bitcoin came from.
Exactly, like little digital receipts.
What? Now let's say you want to make a purchase that costs, let's say, 0.25 Bitcoin.
Okay.
You might not have a single input for exactly that amount.
Right, right.
So instead you can combine multiple inputs, kind of like pulling together different bills and coins from your wallet.
Okay.
To reach that required 0.25 Bitcoin.
Okay, so I gather the right receipts, combine them to cover the cost, and then I send them off to the seller.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay.
And this is where the outputs come in.
Yeah.
One output is going to go to the seller's address, transferring that 0.25 Bitcoin. But what if the combined value of your inputs is actually, say, zero point 0.5 Bitcoin?
Well, I wouldn't want to overpay, so there must be a way to get that extra back.
You're exactly right. That's what that second output is for.
Okay.
The remaining 0.25 Bitcoin is sent back to you as change
Yeah.
to a new address that you control.
Oh.
So it's like receiving change after you pay with a larger bill in a store.
So it keeps everything neatly balanced.
Exactly. It keeps everything nice and tidy.
I'm really starting to appreciate the elegance of this whole system.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
But honestly, it also sounds a little complicated for, the average person.
Yeah.
Like, is this something that we need to worry about, or does it all just kind of happen in the background?
That's the beauty of it. All that complexity is handled by the software.
Oh,
Your
yeah.
wallet takes care of combining the right inputs and creating the necessary outputs.
Oh, wow.
All you have to do is specify the amount you want to send and the recipient's address.
So even though the mechanics are, kind of intricate,
Yeah.
the user experience is pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it is.
That's good. That's reassuring.
Yeah.
It reminds me of, how we were talking about Merkle trees and simplified payment verification.
Hmm.
This white paper seems to really try to balance having this robust technology
Yeah.
with making it accessible for, everyday people.
Precisely.
Cool?
And again, that's really a testament to Satoshi's vision.
Yeah.
It's not just this theoretical thing. It really takes into account how this would actually be used.
It really is amazing to think about how all of this, the decentralized network, the proof of work system, these intricate transaction mechanisms,
Right.
it's all outlined in this one document, and it was written over 15 years ago.
It's incredible. It really is a groundbreaking piece of work.
And, we need to remember that this isn't a static document, right?
Right. Exactly.
Bitcoin is constantly evolving.
Yeah.
Developers are always building on these core ideas and refining the system.
It's a living system. It's constantly adapting.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the most exciting things about it, honestly.
Yeah, I agree.
We've covered a lot of ground today, from the philosophical underpinnings to the, very technical detail.
Yeah, we went deep.
But the biggest takeaway for me is just, the sheer ingenuity and foresight of Satoshi's vision.
It's inspiring, isn't it?
It really is. It really is.
The white paper, it's not just a blueprint for this new technology. It's a challenge to, conventional thinking about money, about trust, and the power of decentralized systems.
And it's a challenge that's still relevant today.
Absolutely. It's a conversation that's still going on.
So as we're wrapping up this deep dive,
Yeah,
I encourage everyone listening to, go and check out the white paper for themselves.
definitely. Take a look.
It's a fascinating read, even if, you don't understand every single technical detail.
Right. It's about the big picture.
Yeah, what matters is understanding those fundamental ideas and the potential that they hold.
It's an invitation to think differently,
Yeah.
to question our assumptions, and to imagine, a future where financial systems could be more transparent, more secure, and more accessible to everyone.
And that's the power of a truly great idea, isn't it?
It really is.
It sparks our curiosity, it gets people debating, and it inspires us to, imagine new possibilities.
It changes the world.
And on that note, I think it's time for us to wrap up. This has been a fascinating exploration of the Bitcoin white paper, but the conversation doesn't end here. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and who knows, maybe you'll be the one to build on these ideas and shape the future of finance. Until next time, keep diving deep.